Rob Licuria, senior editor at Gold Derby, here with Three Body Problem star Alex Sharp. Alex, you've said recently that Three Body Problem was one of the most challenging things that you've ever done on screen. Can you tell us why that is?
Yes, yeah, no, it's true. Well, I guess just finding. Usually there are these kind of like reference points when I start like working on something. You know, you find like a lot of things that you have in common with the character, and um, and then you go on a journey about like kind of exaggerating those or like zoning in on them. And I think like when I read a script that was, you know, the character was like deeply at peace with his own mortality, I was like, oh my god, I'm definitely not there. But so it was then about just working out what I could do to get myself as close to that as possible. And it was a really surprising. Like I just didn't know how I would be able to achieve that, or like what would work best. And it was just like a surprising, really challenging journey to work out what that was, and then do it.
So
But
then,
very fulfilling.
yeah, I can imagine it would have been because this show, by the way, just completely blew me away. It's so audacious, ambitious, it's so riveting. There's so many great concepts. But at the heart of it, like at the emotional core, I think for me and for many of us, is really the relationship between the characters that you and Jess Hong play. And I'm curious then, what would typically go into portraying a man who is dying? Because that's not something I guess that you get every day in your job. So talk me through that.
Yeah, well, there were I guess multiple ways into it that I found. I worked with death doulas. Um, Interestingly, like that was something before I started the job I didn't even know was a career that people had. That was incredible, and they're all incredible people. I did like a bunch of workshops with them. Um, you know, there were workshops that they would do with terminally ill people in real life because you know, for example, like one of the things, if you say have a year and a half to live, um, that is quite commonly the most distressing thing about that experience is the lack of reference point of to what it will be like and what is to come. And so there are two different death doulas I worked with who had kind of created workshops specifically to almost like experientially through meditation, through storytelling, almost through like borderline hypnosis, create like a reference point for what that would be, so that people who are terminally ill can move forward with that information, which is so beautiful. Um, that there are people out there thinking of these things and providing them to people who need that so deeply. And I was very fortunate to be able to, as a not terminally ill person, to experience that. Um, so there's like things like that, and I think like the weight loss was just something I was always gonna do because it just felt like it would honestly just be really offensive in a way not to, because the number one thing with pancreatic cancer is weight loss. That's like the usually the first and most significant symptom. So I just thought like just visually, just purely visually, like it just makes sense to do that. But then that also tied into, you know, when you lose that much weight, it changes how you walk, you talk, everything. Like changes like the look in your eye. Like it's a whole sort of extra layer to how you move through the world, and it helps psychologically because the character really um, he loses everything. He loses his friend. He's lost his career. He loses the woman he loves. He's losing his body. He's losing his life. And you know, it's quite hard to play a character that like loses that much. Usually, you get like some small victories here or there, but that it just kind of helped with that and understanding how someone operates when from that place, and like the different ways that you can break um, as a person. And Will is, I just thought, he's just very beautiful. He operates from a place of such immense love um, and clarity, which I think is common often with people who are dealing with facing their own mortality. So yeah, it was just about, look, you just kind of try, you just throw everything at it and try and get as close to something like that as possible, because you can't ever fully experience that until you do, which we all do.
Yeah, geez, that's a really good answer because I've been thinking for some time about the show. This is really because it resonated with me so profoundly and surprisingly. And for the Will character, I've been wondering why I found him so effective and why I was really drawn to him. And I think a lot of that was that he was so at peace. And maybe that is aspirational. Like, what do you think? Is that something that you maybe have heard from fans that they really loved that character, not only because they felt bad for him and they loved him as his journey went through the whole series, but also because he seemed so at peace, even though he's lost pretty much everything. That's a lot to handle for a character.
Yeah, I think he has. I think just as Alex, just generally in life, like perspective, um, for for an artist, for a plumber, for a chef, like whoever you are, whatever you do, like perspective is, the older I get, it seems to me like the most important thing in the world. If you have perspective, so many other things kind of fall into place. And I think Will is a guy, even before he was terminally ill, who has a very different, and I would argue, I'm biased because I'm team adore Will, but like a more advanced perspective than I think a lot of other people that are around him. And he's focused on different things. We need different people to be focused on different things to like make a society work, and so that's good. And you've got people who are super hard driving forward, and people who just want to hang out on a beach, and like it's good. There's variety is the spice of life, but I just feel there's something very enlightened and special about Will. There was a line that was it ended up being cut, which I was really sad about, in the bar scene at the beginning of the season, where Jack makes a comment to Will about something to do with him kind of giving up and just being a teacher. And Will responds, "Don't you think there's something really noble about dedicating your life to the future?" And that's what I'm doing with teaching. And yeah, I think that's Will. And then you put that person in the position of being terminally ill, and it's kind of like almost like a microcosm, like metaphor for like what humanity as a singular organism in three body problem is dealing with, like its imminent potential demise. And of course, a huge part of the story is how we fight back, and so the relationship to time in the show is really interesting, fighting back within this specific amount of time. But Will is going through what humanity's going through on a smaller scale, because it's just him, and a more immediate scale. And and I think he responds with love. Like that's how he chooses to, he accepts his fate, and he uses the last of his time for love. And I think, like, look, if you and I were sitting while we are on the Zoom call and we heard that like an asteroid was going to hit Earth in 24 hours, the first thing probably that both of us would think about would be who the people are where we're going to go and be with in that space of time. And so I think when push comes to shove, we do respond from love. And I think Will is just like a special person, that he has this kind of perspective where he's doing that a little early and with more clarity than I think most people would.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was talking to Jess about some of her interactions on the show, and given that she was so new to really working on a big show like this, what was it like for the two of you to explore those two characters together, particularly in the latter episodes as Will is about to, die. There's some beautiful moments, very emotional, very raw and open between you and Jess. And I'd love you to talk us through what those scenes were like when you were shooting them.
Yeah, I think it was so important to kind of create on on those days that we were shooting those scenes. There's such um, a sort of sacred air around the two of them, and it felt like Will's story is so separate, sort of thematically and tonally, in a lot of ways. Maybe not thematically, but definitely tonally to the rest of the show. And so those scenes, I was very aware that like Jess's character is like coming from this kind of thriller adventure side of things, and then she's with me alone on a beach. And so it was like just really important to me that we kind of captured that sacredness, that kind of like a special bubble of what should be, hopefully for the audience, what people want to be a thing. So, but Jess and I just had like a very strong connection as friends. That helps. But it was just like we really just tried to be super focused and in a very specific place and be as hyper present with each other as we possibly could. Um, and we talked about that before we got on set, because with directors coming in and out and stuff, it's changing. You have to kind of pivot
Yeah.
constantly to how different people work, and so you have to really um, build a rapport, like a working rapport with your co-stars. um, but Jess is a dream to work with. um, so it wasn't too hard, because she's a great actress and she's a great human being. um, I love her so much.
Yeah, she's pretty cool. Of all the mind-bending sci-fi and character narratives, there's one scene that you really could have knocked me over with a feather because it's so effective. It's a great example, by the way, of how a music supervisor can needle drop in a show perfectly. And I appreciate that when you filmed the scene where Will goes to buy the star, I appreciate you're probably not walking through all these scenes with Lana Del Rey blaring on a speaker, but it's such a simple scene and it's so meaningful and it really resonated with me. I just wonder if shooting that scene was amazing for you as well, or was it more just like you did it and then what it became in the final cut was something that you weren't expecting?
Well, that's a great question. I've never been asked that. I love that question. As it so happens, I had been listening. Weirdly, this is like a fun weird thing. I had been listening to that song um, on that day of shooting as like part of a playlist I made, which is just weird. I know that David Benioff is responsible for that choice. Um, I think when I was shooting it, I knew that it was the end of the episode. I knew that the episode 6 came to a conclusion on that scene. But of course, the scene kind of starts when I'm like walking into the ocean, um, looking at the boats. So I just knew I had pages and pages, like minutes long, of absolute silence where I had a huge amount to communicate.
Yeah,
Um, which was an interesting thing to kind of to think about, how to like visually, experientially, like sew that thread through. And I knew that music would be a part of it. So I spoke to David, Dan, and Alex, and Menki, and sort of asked them all um, what they sort of thought that what kind of music it might be. That none of them really knew the answer, but they kind of gave like a tone that it might be. But yeah, in playing that scene where I'm looking at the screen, um, I was just thinking about, it was, I think when I was first playing that, I was thinking about Jin. And I was, I'm arriving to buy her the star. This anonymous gesture is one of the last things that I do. And then actually, I think it was interesting. I was like playing around with it. It didn't feel like it was quite working. And then when I saw that, when I was like really taking in that huge board with all these beautiful visuals from all over the world, it just hit me. The board kind of did the work for me because I was just reacting to it, and it was like this guy is like in the twilight moments of his life, and he's come in to like buy her a star, but just for a moment before he says I'm here to buy a star, he's almost confronted with in such a beautiful and unexpected way, like everything that he's going to be missing out on when he dies. And so that was like really this huge pixelated screen that I walked past was my scene partner, um, and which was an interesting scene partner, and it did a lot of the work for me because it made me so sad.
Yeah.
Um, it's so beautiful though, and Minky's direction. She's such a sensitive director, and she was amazing to work with. Um, so yeah, and then Lana Del Rey. And when David told me that way before I saw it, he was like, "We haven't quite got there with the rights yet, but I think it's going to be video games by Lana Del Rey." And I was like, "Oh my god,
Right.
that's that's pretty
Perfect.
cool. That's pretty cool."
Yeah. But honestly, Alex, like with all of the things that this show threw at me as a viewer, that I was just completely, oh, it was breathtaking. It was that scene where I was like, okay, I'm in now. Like this is my show, and that's what I mean. So the simplest thing can sometimes be so effective, and a lot of that had to do with, I guess, Will's journey, but of course your performance. So yeah, I just wanted to let you know that.
Thank
Um,
you so much.
yeah. My final question is not necessarily three body problem related, but you won a Tony, of course, for the Curious Incident, and it was definitely a big breakthrough. You were literally, not literally, virtually 5 minutes out of Juilliard, and
Yeah.
I think it was actually a year later. But what would your advice be to fellow younger actors who also have a blank resume, like you said on that night, and also like you said, how you still feel like you can do anything? Would you still feel that way, and would you be telling young actors to just keep dreaming?
Well, I would say that what happened to me was very unusual.
Yeah.
Uh, but I would also say, it's a lot of like when that did happen, the press kind of write a narrative around you about you, and that narrative for me was sort of overnight success. But I had been trying to be an actor for a long time, and had been enormously unsuccessful. um, so I always sort of resent when that narrative is kind of leaned into, like, oh, so he just had something and like it blew him up. It was like, no, it like it was a long journey of failure, um, and then I got really lucky. So I think, like, it's a tricky thing because everyone's journey is so incredibly different, and I think like the most important thing is to really know, for a young actor, to like really know that you want to do it. Like if you feel like I can't breathe without doing this, then you're doing the right thing. If you don't feel like that, it can be a very disjointed and unpleasant experience being an actor in a lot of ways, and it's just not it's not a happy life to be going after something that's so tumultuous and unpredictable and unsustainable in a lot of ways, without that kind of like level of need to do it. So I think that's super important. But I think, I'm always hesitant to give too much advice. I just don't feel qualified enough. But I think everyone kind of knows what they need to do for the like. It's so personal that only the individual can really know. And I think like now, it's so different now. It's like, you know, find film, like find people who are making interesting creative content online,
Yeah.
on social media. That might be a way to just the more experience you get, the better, and just start failing, because like the numbers are like 99 failures, one success. So you just got to start logging the 99.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think like having the only thing in life we can really control is our attitude towards things. So actually, that would be my advice. That being very, very true, adjusting one's attitude, this really changed a lot for me. Like, I used to hate making self tapes, hate auditioning. I just decided, perhaps slightly psychotically, one day, I love making self tapes. I've just like made an executive decision. I like doing this, and I just started faking it till I make it, kind of thing, in terms of like mentality towards that, um, and training myself almost to like get a self tape request and be like, yes, a self tape opportunity, an
Yes.
opportunity to act, to create like almost like a short film, like
Mm.
make it creative. I think
Wow.
that might be helpful.
That is very helpful. On that note, thank you, Alex, for your insight today. Thank you for your time. Congrats on some really beautiful work in Three Body Problem.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you.